morning. We're pleased to have with us this morning Republican presidential candidate and the former governor of Florida, Jon Bush, also known as Jeb Bush. Welcome, Governor.
Good to be here.
Good to have you here. When's the last time someone called you John?
Never.
Okay. All right. You prefer Jeb, I take it.
Absolutely. When I was born, my parents came up with this, and I don't know why they did it, but I really appreciate it a lot.
Well, who are you to argue, right?
Exactly.
So, Governor, if you were in the White House right now, give me a couple of specific steps you and your administration would be taking to improve our ability, which apparently needs improving, to identify and deal with potential homegrown terrorists.
I think we need to get the FBI to open up and to make sure that they cooperate with local and state law enforcement. We have 700, 800,000 cops on the beat, and the FBI needs to transform itself culturally to make sure that the eyes and ears of law enforcement, after being trained, can help us identify people, number one. Number two, we need to improve the metadata program, put it back into play. The Patriot Act has been a useful tool to keep us safe. We just, as citizens, we need to be aware of these things for sure.
Let me follow up on that, because that's a great point about the FBI, because as we know, we found out after 9/11 that we had these silos of law enforcement where they didn't communicate. Then in the Boston Marathon bombings, FBI cooperation with the local authorities was not all it could have been. Exactly how would a President Bush change that deeply entrenched, long-standing culture?
Well, first of all, it's better than it was prior to 9/11, but a president needs to bang heads, man. That's what they do. We have a
So you call people in and read them the riot act?
Yeah, you've got to be able to look. I was governor of the state, and we had task force, terrorism task force. They were useful, but I think our guys never felt like they were equal partners with the FBI. And it's just a force multiplier effect. Think about it. I mean, it is what, 50 to 100 times more law enforcement people at the local and state level than there is in Washington.
Do you think we need to intensify surveillance of mosques and other aspects of Muslim life here?
If there is a clear threat. We don't. Look, Donald Trump is saying, yeah, we're going to not allow Muslims to come in. We're going to close mosques. There has to be a verifiable concern, and there should be scrutiny for sure. That's the duty of the government, is to protect the homeland. And so if there is isolated cases of people that are preaching radical thought that would create jihad in our own country, of course we should be monitoring that. And there are legitimate ways to do it to protect people's civil liberties.
What's a bigger threat, more pressing threat? Islamic terrorism or non-Islamic terror like the Planned Parenthood murders?
Look, the Planned Parenthood murders and these other isolated cases are deranged people. We have a separate issue related to mental health challenges. People that go spiral out of control, we need to figure out a way to intervene early there too. We need to make sure that our mental health networks there's no holes in them. All of that requires a vigilant citizenship. I think it's easier today for people to live a separate life over the internet, get all of their views validated, get angry, live a life quietly, and then emerge and create real hardship for a lot of innocent people. And it's in a free society, this is difficult, but we need to re-engage with all of us together.
Well, there's some talk of exerting greater control and restrictions over the internet, over access, maybe shutting down certain websites. Is that feasible?
I think there's more cooperation necessary between the federal government and Twitter and these other great platforms. We need to make sure that there's a feeling of trust, so that if someone is spewing out venom, hateful venom on Twitter, that there's a way to quickly get it off the air. But we can balance the civil liberties and freedom that we want to protect and protect the homeland. Look, these terrorists, what they want to do is attack our vulnerability, and our vulnerability is that we're free. This is what they despise, and the last thing we need to do is to lose our freedom in the quest of protecting ourselves against them.
Governor, take a breath. We will take one, and we'll continue our conversation after a short break with presidential candidate Jeb Bush. Stay with us. Welcome back. We're talking with Jeb Bush, former governor of Florida, now Republican presidential candidate. And Governor, you mentioned the T word. Let the record show I didn't bring him up, but you mentioned Trump. You recently tweeted, Quote, maybe Donald negotiated a deal with his buddy Hillary Clinton. Continuing this path will put her in the White House. And then the other day, you said of his plan to restrict Muslim access to the U.S., all of this helps his buddy Hillary Clinton.
Of course it does.
Do you really believe he's out to help her?
I don't know how else to describe it. He's motivated for some reason, but he's not motivated to win the presidency. He would make it impossible for a Republican to win if he continues down this path. Look, he's not a serious person. He's not a serious candidate. We're living in serious times, and his proposals are completely unserious. And I think if people see that over time, he's not going to be elected. But people have kind of forgotten that he was a Democrat, you know, not that long ago, that he supported Hillary Clinton, that he thought Hillary Clinton would be a good negotiator with Iran. That turned out to be great, wasn't it? We created an agreement with Iran that actually legitimizes a regime that is an equal challenge for our country. ISIS is a challenge, but so is Iran as the largest sponsor of terrorism. This guy doesn't know what he's talking about.
I mean, that would be quite the conspiracy. It would make the Manchurian Candidate look like child's play.
Whether it's motivated by him or not, the simple fact is his winning the primary, the Republican nomination, would guarantee that Hillary Clinton would be elected president.
Well, we have quite a few viewers in New Hampshire, many of whom are apparently Trump supporters, at least for now. Why don't you speak directly to them and explain to them why they should abandon him and support you?
Look, I realize why people are supporting Donald Trump. It's a legitimate reason of frustration and anger that Washington can't get their act together, and he comes across as a strong guy. But if they look at his record and they look at what he's advocating, that's not strength. That's just volume. And what I'm advocating is fixing a few of these big complex things and making a case that a steady hand in times of great challenges is more important for our country. We need to be secure so we can get back to the business of high sustained economic growth. And I have plans, detailed plans, to fortify our national and economic security. That's what I tell people, and guess what? We're making steady progress in New Hampshire. It's a great place to campaign where you can complete a sentence in the English language rather than tweet something out.
That's interesting, because even in New Hampshire, which weathered the recession better than most states and has been pretty quiet, there haven't been a lot of raging political controversies there, there's plenty of dissatisfaction with the establishments of both parties. You see Bernie Sanders leading on the Democratic side, and you in particular seem to have been hurt by the perception that you represent an establishment that's been discredited in the minds of many voters. Take that on directly. What's your rebuttal to that?
Well, 32 years in the private sector, 8 years in Tallahassee, Florida, where I disrupted the establishment in the 4th largest state in the country, now 3rd largest state. And I turned it upside down, applying conservative principles consistently. I didn't shout at people. I didn't divide people. I said, this is what we're going to do. I ran on a platform of conservative reform, and I applied it, and it worked. We led the nation in job growth. We reduced the government by 11%, the state government. We led the nation with 1.3 million jobs created. Small businesses were flourishing. Income grew. We challenged the orthodoxy of education, and we won. That story of reform is what I share with people, and it's a far cry from the gridlock in Washington, D.C. I think I know how to fix that, but I wasn't part of that, and I don't believe in it. In fact, our democracy right now is imperiled because we don't have leaders that actually are trying to force consensus to fix a few big, complex things.
Want to come back in here in a couple of weeks and debate Trump one-on-one?
I'd love it. Bring him on, baby.
I'll see what I can do. Thanks, Governor.
Thank you.
Good luck. Jeb Bush, Republican presidential candidate. That's it for me. Now, back to my colleagues for more WBZ News.